everyone. We're going to talk about soufflés this week. So there's a couple different kinds, but the main one is the hot soufflé. So that is what we consider to be a true soufflé. A soufflé may sound kind of fancy. You may have heard it in your, typical 50s housewife shows where like, oh no, everyone's late to my dinner party and my soufflé has fallen. Like, what does that mean? It sounds horrible and like her dinner party's ruined. Kinda is, because soufflés are very time sensitive. So we'll explore kind of why is that, and also how to prepare them from the beginning to the end. So what you'll start with is that soufflés are always baked in a ramekin. So we're specifically talking about hot soufflés right now, and they are baked. So the first step here is that you need to prepare your ramekins. So this is a ramekin. It's a porcelain dish. We specifically like to bake things in ramekins because it is an egg base. So anything that is an egg, as you remember, they don't really like rapid temperature changes. So having the insulation around it does help to make it rise evenly. Okay. So first up, you're going to take your ramekin. You're going to take some melted butter. Just brush melted butter on the inside, and then you're going to coat the whole thing in granulated sugar. So basically you're gonna have a buttered ramekin, the whole thing's gonna be covered in sugar. You're gonna do that to every single one, and you're gonna do that before you even start the baking process. They're all gonna be lined up on your sheet tray ready to go. So the reason why we do this is because egg proteins like to bind to things while they're cooking. So if your egg proteins are binding to the side of your cup, you're not going to get the rise. It's just going to get stuck. And basically, that since everything cooks from the outside in, what you're going to get is the outside is going to stick on the outside. The outside is going to get stuck, and then on the inside, you're going to make sort of like a volcano because the steam is really what's contributing to the rise of the entire dessert. So basically what happens is you've got a lot of moisture in this thing. We've greased the sides of it, so whenever it rises up nice and flat and tall. The sides are straight. So preheat your oven. Preheat your oven to about 400 to 425. We do this because, like I said, we need the steam. We need this thing to expand and rise for us. If you put it into a cold oven, then basically it's just gonna set. It's not going to be fluffy. It's not gonna have the same type of texture, and you're gonna be pretty disappointed. So get a piping bag. So we get a piping bag for when we actually have the soufflé mix made and we're getting ready to pipe them into our ramekins. So have that already ready. Your typical soufflé starts with some sort of a pastry cream base. That pastry cream base can either be a flour thickened pastry cream or a cornstarch. There's both examples in your book if you look at page 500 and page 525. So you start by making a custard, and this is what we call the base. Okay, so obviously you're going to cook it in a pot. It's going to be hot. You're going to take that base, cool it down to room temperature. This is the only part about the recipe that you can actually make ahead a little bit. If you have too much of it, or maybe you're a restaurant that's going to serve soufflés, then you can actually make the base ahead of time as long as you heat it back up to room temperature, or just bring it back up to room temperature. I wouldn't apply heat to it again, but you have your base and it's at room temperature. Then you're going to take your stiff peak whipped cream. I'm sorry, whipped egg whites. Sorry, forget that. You're going to take your whipped egg whites, fold them into the base, and then very quickly pipe them into the ramekins that you already have prepared. okay? Pipe into ramekins. Okay, so you will notice in the pictures that's on page 500, he's actually using a spatula to put the mix into the ramekins. I don't know why that they show it that way. It's probably the messiest way to get your souffle mix into your ramekins. So that's not my recommendation. He may just be showing it for the purposes of showing like what the mix is supposed to look like. But generally we would just pipe it in. It also goes considerably faster and it's a lot cleaner. So you would level off the top of it if you made any mistakes, or maybe it formed like a mountain peak or something like that. It generally doesn't level itself very well whenever you put it into the oven. So do make sure that before it goes in that everything is generally flat. Okay? Because what you're going for is you have your ramekin down here, and then you've got your mix inside, so this is raw mix. And then while it bakes, what happens is it rises up above the sides, and then it makes this nice little collar around the side, and then the top is flat. So a finished souffle looks like this. So this is how it should be served to the guest. So this is kind of where the tricky part comes in, is that souffles are very temperature sensitive. When they are hot and fresh right out of the oven, they're wonderful, they're delicious, they look how they're supposed to. So your souffles are very temperature sensitive, and basically what happens is the second that you take them out of the oven, they start deflating. So this top part just kind of starts shrinking down and shrinking down. Goes kind of slowly at first, but after a while it looks kind of like shriveled up, and it's almost like even with the top of your ramekin. Sometimes it can also sink down. That's all from heat loss, okay? So if you put these on your menu, you have to remember that this is going to happen. There's nothing that you can do to stop it. So if you're in a banquet type situation or at a dinner party, it's absolutely essential that you have good communication with whoever is the host of the party. Usually there's some sort of like a head waiter or a captain over the banquet or over the dinner party. So you would tell them, look, this is their dessert. It's very important that you tell me the second that, the salad goes down, the second that the entree goes down. Depending on how big your ramekin is, you would kind of know how long it takes for that item to bake. If you've never made them before, the first dinner party that you put them on the menu for would not be the time to figure it out. So if you're gonna put them on your menu, you gotta put a little bit of R&D into this. So you would say, okay, well, my ramekin is very small. It takes about 15 minutes for me to bake this thing, right? So generally we give about 15-20 minutes for a course of the main entree. So we would put the souffles into the oven the second that they say, okay, entree is down. That way we have adequate amount of time for these things to rise. So if you're making them in a deck oven, you can just prop the oven door open when you see that they have adequately risen, they're slightly golden brown, and then the sides are dry. If the sides still look real wet, it has not fully set. The proteins have not binded all the way. They're not totally ready to come out. They will collapse on their own just from not having good structure if you take them out at that point. So if you are waiting for the party to tell you that they are ready for dessert, you could just kind of leave them in a warmish environment, such as having the oven door propped open and the temperature turned way down. That will buy you a couple minutes. It won't buy you a whole lot of time, but it'll buy you a couple minutes. So whenever you're ready, the host says, okay, we're ready to go. You would have someone go ahead of you. You've got your ramekins on, you've transferred them to a waiter tray, right? You've probably put some dusting of like no melt sugar or something on top. just something real fast. Complicated decor at this point is not going to be a good option. And you're just gonna run. You're gonna take that thing to the dining room or the banquet room or wherever it needs to go. The waiter is going to pass it out immediately, okay? So this kind of shows that there's quite a few concerns with the service of this type of dessert. It's not a great choice for a large banquet. It's almost impossible to pull off unless you've got a whole lot of staff. Most people don't have the staff to make that happen. But like for small dinner parties, very special occasions, people are still kind of impressed by them. They think they're delicious and they're something that you don't really have every day. So it's a fun thing to learn to add into your repertoire. I would suggest that you try them if you have the ingredients to make them at home. They're not too complicated, and you can always eliminate the liqueurs and things, and you can flavor it however you like. If there's something that you are not a fan of, you can always kind of swap that out. As long as you keep the ratio of that the base and the whipped egg whites the same. Okay. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about a frozen mousse. It's very different. Has much different rules for handling, of course. One's hot, one's cold. So a frozen mousse is usually kind of a play on a mousse. So it does still use a base. The base is usually a curd. So a curd can be anything. It can be a lemon curd, orange curd, lime curd, whatever suits your fancy. And then we fold in whipped cream and whipped egg whites. In the form of an Italian meringue. Okay, so the way that you achieve the same look on a frozen souffle as on a hot souffle is that you take either a plastic piece of acetate, so it's strips of plastic like you've seen them in the bakery. We cut off a small piece, wrap it around, tape it, and then whenever you pipe in the mousse mix here that you've made, it will go up past the top to the top of where the plastic is, and then you'll level that off with a spatula. That then goes into the freezer. Okay. For this type of dessert, no need to do the butter and the sugar on the inside. That's not necessary, obviously. So these get frozen and then they're basically taken out a little bit before service, just so that they can come up to temperature a little bit. It's best if they soften some. It makes the flavors a little bit richer. When things are very frozen solid, they tend to not be as flavorful, just because of how our tongue and olfactory senses actually process that. So it's important that you give it a little bit of time to what we say temper. So come up to temperature just a little bit, and then serve it from there. It's also a better experience for your guests, to where they're not just kind of struggling with it to get their spoon in there. Okay. So that's about it for souffles. I will post a few videos to go along with this, and we'll go over your homework. Thanks.